This is an AudioMint original.
Welcome to Nation of Animation, a cartoon book club podcast for all ages. I am one of your hosts, Brooke Aaron Smith.
And I'm your other host, Ryan Stevens. And this week, we're talking about everybody's favorite. We're up early. We're burning the morning oil for you listeners. We are here. We're sleepy, and Brooke's gonna handle this one by herself. Bye, everybody.
Ooh, not your best bit.
I'm coming back. My professionalism forbid me from running away like I want to. So,
I'm so glad. Thank you for not leaving me alone. I really appreciate it.
You can handle it, but you don't have to.
Well, dear listeners, today we are talking about one of the most popular animated series right now that had its season 5 premiere last week. If you're a fan of the show, you hear that, you know exactly what it is.
You probably already know what's up.
Because it's Rick and Morty, created by Dan Harmon and Justin Roiland, which airs on Adult Swim on Sundays.
That's the show. Welcome to the Rick and Morty episode. We're finally doing it. We're getting it out of the way.
I like Rick and Morty. I had a really fun time this last week rewatching
the entire series.
Yeah, mainlining it.
Yeah, we've been in a Rick and Morty hyperbaric chamber. Rick and Morty 100 years, nothing but Rick and Morty. All Ricks, all Mortys, all the time.
So the first episode of Rick and Morty premiered in 2013. They are currently starting with the 5th season. It's underway. The first episode premiered last week at the time of this recording, and the next episode will premiere
tomorrow,
Sunday. Yeah. An interesting fact about the new season that I read in an interview, Justin Roiland said that he wanted to swap episodes 1 and 2 and have 2 be the season premiere. So, big stuff for 2, I guess.
Keep that in mind, everybody.
Also, just some news about Rick and Morty. I guess I'm just the Rick and Morty news source.
You are. Rick and Morty News Corner.
One of my very favorite people that I follow on Twitter, her name is Grace Freud. She's a writer on a future season of Rick and Morty, but she said not season 5. So, in good news, they're already working on the other ones.
Keep looking forward.
They've got writing going. Maybe things will progress a little faster than they have in the past. She also wrote the Rick and Morty comic Jerry Marie #1 under the name Grace Thomas. Neat. So if you've read that, you've read her work.
Neat. So yeah, the show began in 2013. For you mathematicians out there, you'll know that 2013 was more than 5 years ago. So it's had sort of a famously inconsistent production schedule, which is fine. You know, let it be ready when it's ready. But that does mean that over the course of now 8 years, I'm not the mathematician. Over the course of 8 years, we're now in season 5 has just begun, which has been interesting to watch the show change and grow in its off season. Like from how its animation style's handled to how the writing team has grown and changed. I think it is interesting to look at how they're already having writers talk about future seasons as season 5 is rolling out, to look at how the animation production schedule works on such a weirdly long timeline.
So some big names do work on the show. Dan Harmon is one of the creators, and he's most famous as the creator of Community.
And Monster House.
And Monster House
is his too.
I would never forget. He's also done tons of other projects. And then Justin Roiland is a voice actor as well as a writer. He voices both Rick and Morty on the show.
You've heard his voice in Adventure Time. You've heard him in Gravity Falls, among other places. And all over his other show, Solar Opposites, which is on Hulu.
He famously created House of Cosby's for the Film Festival Channel 101, which ended after the Cosby estate sent a cease and desist letter and threatened to sue.
That episode in his life, I guess, sort of indirectly created Rick and Morty, because after that cease and desist, he wanted to, in 2006, he was jonesing for more controversy, as many, comedians were in the early aughts. So he made a little short called The Real Animated Adventures of Doc and Marty, which is meant to be a parody of Doc Brown and Marty McFly from Back to the Future, where if you go and watch it, which you shouldn't, but if you did, you would hear like early prototypes of like Rick and Morty's voices, and also the characters look pretty much like Rick and Morty, just with a lot less polish. And that sort of planted the seed for this version of this show that we're now talking about.
Justin Roiland has also, in the years since Rick and Morty has sort of blown up, created a video game company. It's called Squanch Games. It was founded in 2016. I looked at the website. They make sort of Rick and Morty type kind of games, things that are set in space or that have the same animation style, which makes sense because that's his, intellectual property.
His MO. Yeah. And that just seems like his personal style. Like Solar Opposites is also about like space aliens and weird science stuff. So that just seems to be Roiland's like genre of interest. So good for him. Cool.
There are also some writers from Rick and Morty that are going on to get some really big projects. Michael Waldron, who was a Rick and Morty writer and producer, is now showrunning Loki on Disney Plus, and he's also working on tons of other Marvel properties. So besides being a huge paycheck, that's also a lot of responsibility, and that's someone who came from the Rick and Morty writers' room.
And they got your favorite Twitterer, so
yeah, so big things
so
coming.
There you go.
For people who are excited about the new season and thinking, I hope this continues for a long time.
Great news.
Since the first episode of season 5 has aired, there are at least 59 episodes left.
After season 3, they signed a production deal to make 70 more episodes with Adult Swim, which would bring the total episode number up to 100, which would make it eligible for syndication, which is how you make the real money in showbiz, which will mean if every season is 10 episodes that they've been in the past, we'll get up to 10 seasons of the show.
So if you don't really know what the show's about, you've got mad scientist Rick and his hapless grandson Morty, and they go on mind-bending sci-fi adventures through space, sort of according to Rick's whims.
Yeah, I mean, the premise of the show is, like, what if Doc Brown was a huge asshole and Marty McFly had no choice but to go along with him? That's kind of the elevator pitch of the show.
Not a huge cast, pretty small, because Justin Roiland voices both Rick and Morty, as we said before. His sister Summer is voiced by Spencer Grammer, daughter of Kelsey Grammer of Frasier fame. His mom, Beth, is voiced by Sarah Chalk, famous from Scrubs. And his dad, Jerry, is voiced by Chris Parnell, who is an SNL alum, who's also been on shows like 30 Rock. So some big names in there.
Chris Parnell of Hot Rod fame.
Your favorite film?
Hot Rod's great.
I have not seen Hot Rod.
You gotta fix that. Anyway, not animated, so we don't care right now. So, yeah, this is Rick and Morty. It has a long sort of cultural shadow. It's pretty big these days. Rick's in Fortnite now. They had a Wendy's deal. They had a bunch of they had like a Pepsi promotion thing. Pringles also latched onto them. So this is a big one. This is a successful one.
They also, the show itself, famously remade popular McDonald's Szechuan sauce, which was released along with the film Mulan. So that's how long ago that was. And that was a whole big debacle of McDonald's re-releasing that and then not having enough supply. You can look it up if you don't know a lot about it.
It's a mess. It's no one's finest hour.
No. But the thing about that is, though, that's most interesting to me, is that I don't believe that was like a paid sponsorship. Like,
no, I think they just thought it'd be funny to talk about this sauce from
I'm sure by some sort of like laws, maybe they had to pay McDonald's to be able to talk about it. But when McDonald's re-released it, I think that was like McDonald's thing.
That was just McDonald's.
It wasn't necessarily a Rick and Morty thing.
Yeah.
It was McDonald's like underground partnering with Rick and Morty, which is just interesting more than anything else. So in the show's history, it has had some criticism because of its lack of continuity, or it's inconsistencies, I'll say. There is continuity within the show, and you do need to have seen other episodes, I feel like, to continue on.
Sometimes.
Yeah.
Like
there are some...
Once a season, a thing will happen. You're like, what's this? And you might want some context. But it's pretty flexible / disinterested in its own continuity for most of the time.
And Justin Roiland talked about, his goal for the show is sort of to have some standalone episodes that you could just watch and have never seen the show at all. And then also keep some sort of plot going. And I just read a Collider interview with him about the new season and what he's working on now. And they were talking about the continuity of the show. And he said, who cares? We can do whatever we want.
Yeah.
Which I think is apparent in the show.
Yeah, I mean, it is a sitcom, so it is about, like, the status quo. This isn't a show that is looking for continuity. This isn't like Avatar, The Last Airbender, where they're trying to tell a constant story. It's, it's loosey-goosey. And I think loosey-goosey is a good way to describe the flow of the show overall. The humor, a lot of the humor in this show comes from Roiland's clear improvisations and his, like, riffing with himself. This is a show that has a lot of extended just runs of a dude rambling for comedic effect. This is also a show where a lot of the sci-fi stuff sounds almost intentionally made up on the spot, with people like the Floopians and Dr. Glip Glop, and it's a lot of stuff that sounds like someone was like, I don't know, what do we call these? Like Goobles, and then we're good to go. And that sort of open-handedness, that sort of easy breeziness, I think is really appealing and makes the broader sci-fi stuff easier to buy into. It also has a real need to be edgy and, like, cynical and nihilistic, and that has some comedic payoff, but is also, like, one of the reasons that this show is maybe an acquired taste for some, is that this is a show that really leans into some cruelty in its humor. It is a show that doesn't really worry too much about punching down sometimes in who it jokes about and who it belittles. And that's, that is a problem that we will be looking at every now and then today as we talk about Richard and Morton.
So we talked a lot about the show. I feel like we're ready to dive into the episodes we picked.
Go.
Maybe we want to do chronological order?
Let's go. We got one from every season except season 5. So
yes. And I have the first two seasons.
So go get them.
So from season 1, there are a couple episodes that I really enjoyed during season 1. I really like the one with Snuffles the dog who becomes Snowball. I think that's a great episode. But in picking episodes this time, I tried to pick episodes that were, like, very consequential to the series. So episodes that do affect the continuity, that sort of reverberate throughout the rest of the show, and I think will continue to. Yeah. So for my season 1 episode, I picked season 1 episode 6, which is Rick Potion number 9, written by Justin Roiland. And it's one of the first episodes I remember watching of the series and really, really enjoying. The Snowball one is before this in order. And I did like that one, but this one I was like, wow, that was really cool. That was really good. So the basic plot of this episode, Morty wants to ask Jessica, who is his long-standing school crush, to the school's annual flu season awareness dance, but she's already going with this guy named Brad who plays sports. So Rick whips up a love potion, quote unquote, that will make anyone who ingests it attracted to Morty. So it's supposed to work great as long as that person doesn't have the flu. Morty administers this to Jessica, and she does love him, but she has the flu, so she spreads this infatuation around the world. First to everyone at the dance, and then to everywhere. So the world goes wild over this, like they're all obsessed with Morty, and it affects everyone but their family, because it doesn't affect people who are blood related to Morty. Then Rick tries to overcorrect by injecting these people with praying mantis pheromones or whatever. And then,
science.
Yeah, eventually they just turn into Cronenbergs.
Like creepy David Cronenberg monsters.
Yes. And the whole world becomes a Cronenberg world. And for once, Rick cannot fix it. Rick and Morty enter another dimension where their selves in that world have just died. So then they have to bury their own bodies in the backyard and just live their lives
just take their
in
places.
this dimension. Yeah, the way they would have in theirs. In their home dimension, the original one, Summer, Beth, and Jerry stay there. Jerry becomes sort of an action hero. He really thrives in the Cronenberg dimension. Beth feels in love with him again. She's loving it. And they make Summer reenact old movies for them.
It seems like they're all doing fairly well as can be given the circumstances.
Yeah, because at the end, Jerry says something like, wow, I wonder whatever happened to Rick and Morty. And Beth says, I don't know, but I'm glad they're not here because for the first time ever, I'm truly happy.
Yeah, which is fun.
So this is a big episode for the series as a whole because in this episode, we move Rick and Morty from Dimension C-137, which is where they were born, where they live, to their new dimension. Their old dimension is referred to throughout the rest of the series. They've gone back there before and checked in. So it's a big deal. And at the end of the episode, there's a great use of this Mazzy Star song as Rick and Morty bury their own dead bodies. And then Morty has to deal with knowing that Rick would do this to him.
Yeah, the end of it is just framed around Morty's face as he silently walks through the house that isn't his house and his family that isn't really his family, and the quiet terror of that being underplayed is really, really effective, and one of the early moments of showing what sort of storytelling this show is capable of beyond fart jokes and other nonsensical silliness.
Speaking of music, there's also this little song that the DJ at the dance sings after he falls in love with Morty, and it's in my head probably every day, and I'm just singing it to myself, but it's I love Morty, and I hope Morty loves me. I'd like to wrap my arms around him and seal him inside me. And it made me laugh so hard the first time I heard it, and it still makes me laugh, so... Great uses of music in this episode.
That's Dan Harmon doing the rap.
Really?
Yeah, that's Dan. Dan Harmon does a lot of the songs in the show because, I don't know, it's something that he finds that he enjoys, I guess.
Nice.
If podcast fans in general might have listened to Dan Harmon's show Harmontown when it was on the air, when it was being recorded, and in it, Harmon would get up and rap a lot, and hearing that and then watching Rick and Morty, oh, that's Dan Harmon rapping. That's him doing his silly little teeny tiny raps. He raps in your next episode too. He's the alien rapper at the thing. So.
Jazz alien rap.
Yeah, jazz alien rap. Yeah.
Which is a hint, if you know, at the next one I'm doing.
You could probably guess.
But continuing on this one, this is one of the first episodes where Rick assists Morty in ruining his life for love, specifically. And it's going to come up in another episode we discuss later. And I believe that this supports my theory for the way the show is going. It's not really a theory. I think it's quite obvious. But I'll talk about it later. Because Ryan disagrees with me.
I do. We'll get there later. I think we have a difference of opinion of what the show actually wants to do. But
it's fine. This episode also sets up a lot of things that will come in the future. Things like the Citadel of Ricks, where all the Ricks have come to live. And then also... Beth's hunt for adventure later in her life, but her want to return to Jerry. And then even a future episode, this is the season 3 premiere, where Morty shows Summer his dead body in the backyard. Also, the fact that the Smiths are now not Rick and Morty's quote-unquote real family. So familial love is brought up throughout the whole series. Definitely in the episodes we're talking about today.
Right. Well, when the main cast is a family, that kind of has to be at least some subtext, if not actual text.
Sure, but I think it's very significant for someone like Rick, who is, hyper intelligent, who sort of rejects any sentimentality or feelings of attachment, especially because now they're not even really his real family. So we get the questions of what is family and what inspires familial love? Is this just something of convenience, or can he really love these people? Does his hyper-intelligent brain see them as just a means to an end, especially now that they're not even his original Beth, Jerry, and Summer? And I do think that they sort of answered that question as time goes on, in that he does love this family despite them not being his quote-unquote real family, and the ways that even the most intelligent among us, the super geniuses, cannot reject the human nature of loving the family unit you build. So that's very interesting for me, especially as we talk about the other episodes and look ahead to future seasons.
Mm-hmm.
Little fun fact about this one, Justin Roiland said it was his favorite episode of the first half of season 1.
Yeah, that makes
Which
sense.
makes sense. I do think it's the strongest one of the first half.
I think this is one of the first episodes where it's like, okay, this is what a Rick and Morty episode is. This is the sort of structure, and this is the sort of voice that I think defines the rest of the series.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, any more thoughts on Rick pushing number 9?
I mean, like, this is, I want to say, like, it's a big Jessica episode, but it isn't, because Jessica, who was, like, Morty's high school crush, is this character who is really only ever seen through Morty's perspective. They, like, almost willfully refuse to give her any character or, like, personality to keep her as this, like, ingenue type thing for Morty to pine over. And on the one hand, that's, like, it's quite tired, and it's quite, like, overdone in pop culture. I'll say that, like, whenever we do see her, she, like, clearly has other friends and has a life that we're not seeing. So the joke there seems to be that we only ever see her through Morty's perspective. But it is still a little, I don't know, tired to be like, this is the character who our main character has a crush on, and that's her. I'll say, like, the season 5 premiere did give her, like, a little more stuff to do, but we'll see if that, like, was a one-off or if, which is my suspicion, is that was a one-off and she'll go back to the background forever.
I don't know. In that one episode where Morty kept trying to find the ways that he could end up with Jessica being there when he died, you get to see her mentioning that her greatest wish is to help hospice patients. Yeah,
that's great. But that reads to me as, like, what would be funny for her to say, hospice patients, and then we'll never really deal with this again. But
I don't know. The characterization of Jessica doesn't really bother me that much, just because, like, every other show does this.
Yeah.
You set up, a love interest.
But, yeah.
I don't know. It really doesn't. It doesn't make me think, the feminism leaves me now.
Right.
Other things might about this show. But that one, it's lower on my list.
Yeah.
Season 2, episode 10 is my next episode. It's called The Wedding Squanchers. This is the season finale of season 2. The general plot of this one, Rick and his family are invited to the wedding of Bird Person and Tammy. Bird Person is his best friend. Tammy is actually one of Summer's friends from school. They met at joint parties hosted by Rick and Summer in season 1, episode 11, Ricksy Business. Rick doesn't want to go, but he accidentally sends Jerry as a gift, so everyone has to. At the wedding, Tammy is revealed to be a deep cover agent for the Intergalactic Federation,
which is news to us that it exists.
Yeah, but they've been hunting down Rick and Bird Person and their friends for crimes against the Federation. So she's putting everyone at the wedding under arrest. So they have to fight off all of these agents, and then Rick and the family get away. They hide out on this very tiny planet that looks a lot like Earth, but is super small. There's no food, and you can traverse the whole thing in less than a day.
You can just walk around it, yeah.
Meanwhile, at home, Earth joins the Intergalactic Federation and starts living by their rules, so they cannot go home. Jerry proposes the idea that the family turns Rick in, and the rest of them disagree with him and say, when you love someone, you love them unconditionally. Rick overhears this and feels bad about what he has done to his family, so he instead surprises them all, tells them he's going to go leave to get ice cream, and ends up calling in a tip on himself under Jerry's name. So Rick gets put in space prison, and the rest of the family begin their new lives on the new Earth, where Jerry can finally get a job because one is assigned to him. So that's the basic premise of this episode. This is also another episode that has repercussions for the rest of the series. It's one of the only season finales that really sort of sets up a cliffhanger. Mm-hmm. You're sitting there at the end and you're thinking, God, what's going to happen next season? And they even reference this in the post-credit scene. We see Mr. Poopy Butthole come back, who watchers will remember was shot by Beth.
In an earlier season 2 episode, yeah.
So he comes back and is saying things like, what's going to happen to the gang next year? And
he also
all this
says,
stuff.
See you in a year and a half or longer, depending on how long it takes for us to make it, which was funny and true. It did take a minute, but that's okay.
Yeah, so this one really sets the audience up to say, oh my goodness, what is going to happen next? Because you know Rick can't stay in space prison. Mm-hmm. And you also know that the Earth cannot stay the way that it has become under the rule of the Intergalactic Federation. Some little things about this episode. There's a picture of Snuffles/Snowball on the wall at breakfast, which just made me laugh because I loved that dog. Tom Kenny is in this episode. He does a lot of ensemble work for Rick and Morty. If you don't know who he is the voice of SpongeBob SquarePants.
You know his voice. He's everywhere.
100%. And he's in this episode as Squanchy, which is another of Rick and Bird Person's friends.
A little like mangy cat guy or something.
Yeah, who would pal around with them. He's a cat, I think.
Cat, I guess.
Yeah. Similar to Rick Potion number 9, there's some great music at the end of this episode as Rick is being put in prison and the family is living their lives. You just hear 9 Inch Nails Hurt. Which
must have cost a pretty penny to use that, but money well spent.
Yeah, I think it works great in the episode. And this one, once again, is a lot of big stuff about familial love. Because we have these people who are not Rick's real family, and he's sacrificing himself for them so that they can go have a good life. He even, in the phone call to give the tip, he makes sure that they're not going to punish his family.
Right.
And they can just live normally. So it's some more sort of sentimentality from Rick that you wouldn't necessarily expect. And also very sweet, when the family is talking about, even though Rick has done these terrible things to him, their love for him is unconditional. But I appreciate what you said, Brian. You wrote in the notes here, you thought Jerry is wrong to want to take Rick to the space cops.
Right. But he's not wrong to say that, this unconditional love has sort of ruined them in the short term and maybe in the long term. Because I think this is another thing that the show acknowledges when it wants to and sort of ignores when it doesn't want to, is that, this is the one thing, is like Rick is a truly destructive presence in their lives. Morty never goes to school. Beth's abandonment concerns with her dad because he left her when she was young and just came back to hang out with Morty once Morty was born. I may have the timeline a little bit fudged, but there's repeatedly this reference to how Rick left her when she was growing up. Has warped the whole family, has warped how they exist and how they have to be on the run because of what Rick did. And that is, he does the kind thing at the end by turning himself in, but this idea that you can just cart your family along and that unconditional love means going along with whatever self-destructive or just other people destructive behaviors the loudest person in your family wants is not good and is not a sustainable way to live.
No, I agree, and I think it brings up, an important issue, real-world issue that maybe Rick and Morty doesn't always touch on, which is how far should love extend when it's hurting yourself?
Right. Yeah, it's not this isn't a fun way to set up a comedy show, but it's Rick's abusive to everyone he's ever met, and that is something that can be played with in a number of ways in fiction. And I think that Jerry as a character, I feel is a little one joke too, because his whole character is basically that he sucks and is in Rick and Morty's world, the worst thing you can be is mediocre, which is what Jerry is. So whenever he has a good point, I'm okay, good on you, man. Good on you. You shouldn't have to live in the shadow of this super genius psychopath just because you don't happen to have a triple-digit IQ.
It's interesting that Morty is also really, for all intents and purposes, mediocre. Mm-hmm. But he's accepted because he goes along with Rick's plans.
He is living in the fantastical, whereas Jerry is just hanging out and occasionally unwittingly ends up in weird situations.
Sure. Now, a few things about this episode. James Callis and Trisha Helfer guest star as Tammy's parents, who are actually robots.
Yeah.
This episode got huge critical acclaim when it came out. Reviews from AV Club, IGN, and Inverse gave it absolutely glowing remarks. People love this episode. I enjoyed this episode too. Mm-hmm. I think there's a lot in it. We were watching it and we were 13 minutes in, maybe, it's a 22-minute episode. And I thought, is this an extra long episode?
No, just extra dense.
Yeah, not in a bad way. Mm-hmm. Just in that
I
thought so much
we're covering a lot of ground, yeah.
Yeah, so I think it's obviously a landmark episode for the series as a whole. And I think that's deserved. I think it's a good, well-written episode. Yeah. And this one was written by Tom Kaufman.
The Cough. As he's known around the writer's room. Yeah. TK. TC. Which one is it?
Okay.
TK. Good. Well, that's what we'll leave in. Yeah, I mean, I think it's like a funny episode too. I think the tiny planet and the planet where the sun is screaming and the planet where everything's on the cob, those are good jokes. Those are good, just like silly things that happen. All the stuff at the big alien wedding is fun. Like the creature designers, whoever's designing all the aliens and stuff in Rick and Morty is earning their pay, because it all looks very, very cool. Every like background creature has clear detail and thought put into how they move and how they look and how they're different from everything else in the world. And that sort of like that Where's Waldo-y, like, look at all these weird aliens is always really fun to see. But I also think that, like, you know, in terms of how crucial this is, learning from Bird Person that, like, he and Rick used to, like, essentially be, like, soldiers in, like, a space war is interesting, because it is, like, oh, Rick used to care about things. Rick used to, like, go want to be the hero. And in future episodes, we hear how Rick is like, yeah, you'll outgrow that. It doesn't pay to give a shit. A sentiment that has a lot of stuff to unpack, but a sentiment that the show tends to like side with Rick on. That said, like, you say that like this episode is super important continuity wise, and in a sense it is. It's an important moment, but like season 3 wastes no time sort of flushing this episode down the toilet. Like that first episode is the premiere of season 3 is like 20 minutes of Rick undoing everything that happens in this episode and just resetting the status quo and being like, yeah, I didn't learn anything and I don't have to because I'm smarter than God.
But I think it's important in especially the way that Rick interacts with the family. I think that's what it's setting up.
Sure.
I do think it's important continuity-wise, so we can disagree on that if we want to.
Well, great. So now we're going to move, speaking of season 3, we're going to jump into season 3. And I have chosen unintentionally 2 episodes that won Primetime Emmy Awards for Outstanding Animated Program. The 2 that have won those awards. So congratulations. But now let's look at why and if we think they deserve it. So season 3, episode 3, Pickle Rick, written by Jessica Gao, directed by Anthony Chun. Famous/infamous in the community, so you probably already know if you know the show. Rick turns himself into a pickle to avoid going to family therapy. And while his family's at therapy, Rick goes on a weird misadventure where he washes down a drain, fights cockroaches, kills a bunch of rats, then escapes the sewer to go be in a weird room full of like Russian mobsters run by an English criminal. He does like a John Wick style just like action adventure for 10 minutes while Morty, Summer, and Beth are all in therapy. And then at the end, he comes to the therapy office while still in pickle form and tries to deny needing therapy and deny that he was scared to go. And then at the end of the episode, we get a nice, like, cutting monologue from the therapist, Dr. Wong, played by Susan Sarandon of Rocky Horror fame and others, but that's what I like to think of her as. And then that is the episode. Rick was a pickle. He shouted about it a lot. And the fans rejoiced. And that's the story of Pickle Rick in 3 sentences, I guess. This is like an interesting sort of change for the series, and I think it's signaled a change that has persisted. This is a very like action-heavy episode. Pickle Rick fights a bunch of things. He fights a bunch of rats with essentially a mech suit made out of rat body parts. And it's a long fight scene. And in interviews, Dan Harmon has talked about the idea of wanting to make it feel like it's too long on purpose, wanting to be like, why is this so indulgently violent? Why is this taking forever to finish the fight? Which I think is a funny joke in itself, but as the show goes on in season 3 and 4, we do get a lot more like highly choreographed, highly drawn out action scenes. And as much as this is still a comedy sitcom about weird science and mean people, it also has a lot of drawn out combat that is well animated and I think shows the skill of the animators involved, but does sort of change how the show moves through its world. In that same interview, Dan Harmon talks about how this episode was inspired by Breaking Bad and moments where in that show Walter White would be like stranded in a situation and have to use science to get out of it. And so the thought of Rick being no longer in his normal body, no longer having all his usual tools and gizmos or arms and legs to be able to solve problems, what he would do if he was just stuck in a pickle body. And from that, we get this whole episode. What's neat about this episode for me is the therapy plotline, which for the first, most of it revolves around the therapist sort of unpacking why the family are so hung up on their grandpa Rick, and specifically why Beth is so hung up on like her dad's approval, and that gets some really like neat cutting insight into those characters. And at the end, when Pickle Rick rolls in and sort of says like, I think therapy is dumb because it makes people more calm, which is a trait we appreciate in the animals we eat, but I'm not a cow, I'm a pickle when I want to be, is like one of the few times we've seen Rick's like self-absorbed logic kind of break down and see him sort of like run out of answers, because then Dr. Wong gives this really concise and well-written speech that, you know, Gal really crushes from a writing standpoint, where she talks about how like, yeah, of course you don't want to go to therapy. You like having big adventures, and I'm sure you'd be bored the same way I'm bored like when I brush my teeth and wipe my ass, because maintenance isn't meant to be an adventure. It's just like a thing that is healthy. And Rick is clearly self-destructive and doesn't want to do like boring, healthy things. And Rick, for the first time in the show, doesn't have a response. He just like quietly takes it, and then they leave. And I think that is like a neat insight into this episode being like meant to have Rick built up as high as possible as this like murder machine, god of death, who can kill everyone even when he's stuck in a pickle. And then a therapist is like, sure, okay, but you also just don't want to be better, do you? That is not why fans like this episode. This is an episode, you know,
That's not why some fans.
That's not why the loudest fans like this episode. Where this is also just one where like, the beginning of the episode, Rick is like, I turned myself into a pickle, I'm Pickle Rick, and then he yells, and there's a lot of fans being like, yeah, he turned himself into a pickle, funniest shit I ever saw, and leaning into the power fantasy of the first half, while not really caring about the dose of reality we get in the second half. So this is kind of an infamous episode of like, a lot of fans missing the point, I guess, and being like, he's so cool, and it's like, well, is he? Is that what you took from this? But that's also a problem with like Breaking Bad and John Wick fans. So I guess they really landed it. They really did it. They emulated the energy. Congratulations, everybody. And then it won an Emmy.
Well, this episode has a lot of gross out humor, which is not my brand of strawberry jam. So I don't actually watch this one a lot. It's got like, it's the scene with the cockroach, which I don't like, and then tearing apart the rat bodies. Mm-hmm. And I don't like that.
It is visceral. There's like guts everywhere in this episode.
You know, it's not a bad episode. It's just not my personal favorite. I do think that they should have called him the RICKLE. Yes. I don't understand. I guess maybe that's the joke, that they missed the joke, but I think I would rewatch it if he were called the RICKLE.
If he was called the RICKLE? I'm a RICKLE! Yeah, that still works. You could still yell that on Twitter. That could have been good. Yeah, this is a rare episode in that it takes place entirely on Earth, and there's no like space aliens or anything from another dimension. There's just big rats, and then Rick is a pickle. And this is a grounded episode of Rick and Morty in which there's a pile of bodies.
Yeah, and lots of fun / serious stuff within the therapist's office. Beth keeps trying to push the therapist onto Summer and Morty because they're really there because they messed up in school. Summer was huffing like glazing for pottery projects, and Morty beat his pants during class. Mm-hmm. So they've been recommended to go there for them. So Summer keeps trying to be like, well, talk to them. Not Summer. Beth keeps trying to be like, well, talk to them. And Dr. Wong keeps saying, well, let's talk about you and your father.
Right. Yeah, I think Dr. Wong, as far as therapists go, and like therapy in pop culture is tricky because in real life therapy is quite time intensive. And so to try and do like an entire therapy session successfully in the 10 minutes-ish they have of screen time would be really difficult. But I think that the way Dr. Wong is written is very patient, very like attentive, while also still like focus on what she thinks they need to like hear and do. Dr. Wong doesn't bat an eye when a pickle walks into her office and just is like, yeah, okay, let's talk about that in a way that is like really intriguing.
Also, another episode that's relatively important for continuity, even just in the fact that they go back to Dr. Wong for family therapy after Beth and Jerry split up, and Dr. Wong actually shows up again in future episodes.
Right. Which I wonder if like the more she comes, the less power she has as a character. Because like to have her be just in this moment this like really powerful presence that sort of sees Rick for what he really is. At the end of the episode, you know, Rick and Beth are both like, yeah, we didn't really need that. We're going to pretend we didn't hear what we just heard. Even when the kids are like, oh, we liked her actually, and we would like more therapy because we need it. for her to come back, she comes back in like the season 4 finale and is sort of just like brushed aside because of big space fights and stuff. And it's like, the longer she sticks around, the less significant her presence is, I guess, which is just like a sitcom problem in general of like long running stories that can't allow too much change, or the show would end. Is curious, Dr. Wong, who is who's depicted as Chinese American, is voiced by a white performer. That's curious.
Well, Beth seems to comment on this in the episode by saying Dr. Wong, racist name.
Which I misread as her just being racist. But
sure, I'm not totally sure what the joke was there.
Sure.
The intentional joke. It's that, yeah, Beth is racist, or Beth thinks it's a racist name, even though Dr. Wong is Asian, or that it is actually racist because Susan Sarandon is voicing her. I didn't really feel like spending the time parsing that out, but
yeah, it's just
I didn't
weird.
get the joke.
It's just a bum note in the song, but yeah. And that's Pickle Rick, everybody. So that's that episode that again did win a Primetime Emmy Award for Outstanding Animated Program, is well known among fans, is sort of a distinct shift of how the show leans on action as a storytelling element. So now let's jump over to season 4, episode 8, just called the Vat of Acid episode, written by Jeff Loveness and Albro Lundy, and directed by Jacob High. So this one is kind of a convoluted setup. Rick pulls Morty into another adventure where they're going to go like do a diamond deal with some aliens. Rick has installed a fake vat of acid for them to jump into if the deal goes bad. Morty thinks this is a stupid plan. Season 4 has a lot of Morty just being like, I don't want to do this. Like this, Morty gets a little tired of it in season 4 overall. And so they go do that. They jump into the vat of acid. They release some fake bones to make it look like they've died. And then they have to wait down there in the vat of acid while the aliens like talk about it. And then Morty gets bored of this, kills the aliens. And then Morty's like, why do we have to do stupid stuff like this? I'm tired of your dumb vats of acid. Make me a thing that saves your place like in a video game so you could try stuff out different times and reload it. And Rick is like, I don't want to do that. Morty like reverse psychology bullies him into making it. Then he makes it, and then it stops being a Vat of Acid episode. It becomes this like video game save place episode instead. And we just get Morty like running around trying things out, then reloading his life to try them again. We then get a lengthy effectively like a silent short of Rick like meeting this girl who wears glasses. They like fall in love. They go on a plane ride together. The plane crashes. They struggle to survive in the Arctic, or like in the Arctic, or just like up in the mountains, I guess. Then they eventually like make it back to safety. They get rescued. They're living happily together and healing. And then Jerry hits the button and like reloads it to before they even met. And then Morty is like sad because he just lost this entire world. It had big like beginning of Up energy of this completely silent little love story unfolding and then getting unceremoniously dumped, which is also a very Rick and Morty thing. Like devoting a lot of time to a concept, emotional time, and thought of like figuring out how it would work, and then just tossing it all out when it would be funny to do so. So then at the end, Morty's like, Rick, I think I learned the lesson. Having a thing that saves your game of life means that you're not actually living in the moment. You're just like treating it like a game. So I don't want to do this anymore. And Rick's like, oh no, that's not the lesson. The lesson is I'm mad at you. And every time you were jumping to reload your game, you're actually jumping into a different universe and like killing that world's Morty to save your space. You selfish little punk. How dare you want things? But don't worry, I can unkill all the Mortys by like merging all these dimensions. You split off. They do that, but then everyone in all those dimensions knows all the things Morty did when he thought he had no consequences. So to escape getting attacked by an angry mob, he has to jump into another fake vat of acid and admit that Rick was right.
And to be clear, he's not unkilling all the Mortys. He's making it so they never existed.
In the first place. Which in a way is unkilling, but I get it is in a way also worse to collapse all of that. Yeah, and then that's the episode. Morty dives in the fake vat. Rick is yet again reminded that he's the smartest man in the world. And that's the show, folks. That's season 4.
And this one is possibly one of Rick's meanest episodes, like intentionally meanest episodes, But hey, there are no consequences at the end,
Right.
so doesn't even matter.
It's also just funny that like the reason Rick doesn't want to make it is because the reason he says in the episode is because Futurama already did it. And I think that's a very funny like meta level of like I don't want to do things that other shows have already done well, which is very funny and feels like just the writers' room being like, well, if we do it, we're going to be compared to Futurama, so we have to find our own spin, and that spin is this like cruelty. There's a fun montage when Morty is using his place-saving thing set to Eric Clapton's It's in the Way That You Use It, which is just very cheesy and silly of Morty, like, using it to take lots of free samples from ice cream. There's also a bit where he's playing a video game and messes up, and rather than reloading the game, he just reloads his life to do better at the game. I thought that was a funny little exaggeration. I will say Eric Clapton is an anti-vaxxer, anti-lockdown moron, so fuck that guy.
I think this episode does some cool things with the animation. We're on Earth for a lot of it.
Mm-hmm.
So the plane crash and where they end up in like these terrible cold mountains, they all get frostbitten. It's very cool. It looks really cool. And there's also not any dialogue in that section,
right,
which is a bit more experimental for them.
Mm-hmm.
The show itself doesn't always break out of its structure.
Mm-hmm.
So to take one section and make it like this almost art house animated piece.
Yeah, it's cool.
It's different for them, and I enjoyed it.
For a show that like made its fame on Justin Roiland like angrily riffing with himself, it is cool to watch them just go, no, we're gonna do it without dialogue. We're just gonna let the images and the sounds and the music tell the story. And I get why this one won another Primetime Emmy Award for Outstanding Animated Program. That it really is doing a lot of stuff that works really well in animation, particularly. And you know that is our whole jam here. I do kind of feel like this episode underlines a thing that is prevalent through all of Rick and Morty, is that it really has to keep Rick as the smartest person in the room. Like, Rick messes up like he does in Rick Potion number 9. Rick needs people's help often. But again and again, the show has to remind us that Rick is smarter than everyone else. And that like the as much as his nihilistic selfish worldview hurts other people, no one can ever really like get around him or beat him because he won't allow it. And in the early seasons and like the first few seasons, this was something that was being dealt with textually as other characters are like, as Morty specifically is like trying to grow and trying to learn to be better than Rick and trying to like find his own sense of purpose in the big, scary, confusing universe. But as the show keeps going, and as we're now in season 5 with more on the way, because challenging Rick or making him change would mean ending the show, we kind of just have to keep kicking the can down the road and have to keep like retreading the ground of like, Rick is smarter, Rick is better, Rick knows more than we do. I think that there is something there in the way that like season 4 has a lot of people getting frustrated with this, like in a metatextual way, seeming to understand that they're in season 4 of a sitcom. But on another level, it is kind of irksome that as time goes on, Rick and Morty's main theme is that the show is very smart. And like, to be clear, it is extremely smart. These are clearly very talented writers, and they're setting up crazy, convoluted concepts that other shows would take like whole episodes to dive into, if not whole series, and they'll throw it away in a single episode, if not just like a single scene. There's like a season 2 episode, I think they go to like a space version of Dave and Buster's and they play a video game that's like playing this dude's entire life. And that's a really complex idea, and they throw it away in 5 minutes because they have the confidence and the ability to back up that confidence to tell these crazy, incredible stories that are like riffing on popular sci-fi tropes and like building their own sense of purpose out of all these cool, like high concept ideas and scientific stuff. But at a certain point, it feels like the show's main theme is that it is smart. And that is sort of like a diminishing return of how often we can, again, be wowed and impressed by Rick outsmarting Morty in a cruel, selfish way. To go to our world of theater, there's this dude named Tom Stoppard, who's a British playwright, and I think that the thesis of every one of his plays is Tom Stoppard is very, very smart. He wrote like Rosencrantz and Guildenstern are Dead as I guess his mainstream hit, and they're all also built on like really intricate structure or really complex like science or philosophy stuff. And at a certain point, that's all well and good, but at a certain point, you just stop emotionally connecting because you're really more going to like a lecture than a piece of entertainment. So I don't know. I don't think Rick and Morty's as up its own navel as Tom Stoppard is, because there's still fun to be had and it's still funny. But there is this like ideological thinning that appears to be happening in the show. Well, then I guess we can mosey on over to the sketchy side, which will be, the next hour or so.
Well, it doesn't really have to be, because one of the biggest issues with Rick and Morty is its toxic fandom.
Mm-hmm.
You have people here who are doxing the female writers because they were not happy with the way season 3 went. You have the same people who will go and harass McDonald's employees who don't have enough Szechuan sauce for them. We talked about this a lot in our Fandomonium episode. So if you really want to hear about this and our thoughts on this, you can go back and give that a listen. In summary, a lot of the fans see themselves in Rick, which is, I would say, even the opposite of what the show wants.
Which, yeah, if you had an ounce of awareness, you realize how that's a problem. But
so in their minds, they can be cynical and they can feel like nothing in the world matters, but they don't have the technology of Rick to make sure nothing matters, first of all. Second of all, the show is trying to tell you this guy is bad. You don't want to be him.
And living in a world where nothing matters is a bad thing. It's not enjoyable and it's not fulfilling. But
there's a group within the fandom that feels this way. And once again, we talk about this a lot in our Fandomonium episode. So please go back, give that a listen, because I think all of our thoughts about it are in there.
Yeah. But the worst part of any fandom is the fans, is what we're seeming to learn. But so, you can enjoy things and not harass people and dox people on Twitter. It's pretty easy. We've never done that, so look at us. I think overall, the notion of how nothing matters and this jadedness that the show really likes to throw around is also, it's not a sketchy side, but it is sort of this betrays a lack of enjoyment in its own concepts. I think you're right. The show does want us to see that Rick's nihilism is unfulfilling, but the show also is even more nihilistic than that, and will throw out even his attempts to make meaning. And that sort of edgier than thou energy is, if not outright, it's not outright sketchy. Obviously, tell the stories people want to tell, of course, but it does sort of have a deleterious effect the longer it goes, I guess.
And I think in that way, the show almost sometimes encourages people to side with Rick. Even we could even say in the same way that shows like Breaking Bad or even BoJack Horseman do. Though I would say here it's to a greater extent, because Rick cannot face consequences yet. I don't know what's going to happen in future seasons. It could be that there comes a time where Rick gets his.
Right.
It's hard with the structure they've created.
Right. That's the thing. Because, for obviously, unreliable narrators and, unlikable leads have existed since stories have existed. And we're not trying to be, morality police. You have to label everything bad with a big red bad stamp or anything in stories. But those other series we mentioned are more keen on shaking up their status quo to really, show consequences. And consequence is not a thing that exists in a show where you can destroy a whole dimension and then just leave and go somewhere else and hang out with your family there.
But I also can see the argument that maybe the point is that even when Rick thinks he's fixed everything, there are consequences.
Sure.
It does reverberate throughout the people he loves or the rest of his life. And I can definitely see that argument as well. And I'm hopeful, we're going to talk about, things we hope for the new season in just a little bit. I'm hopeful to see more of that in the new season. That's one of the things that I specifically would like to see more of.
Yeah. And I think we can go ahead and pivot to that from here, because I think the rest of our sketchy side stuff is stuff we'd like to see them keep working on in the new season. For example, I think that, Beth and Summer as the women of the family, I'd say they have distinct personalities, which is neat, but they're often, I'd say all too often, used to supplement Rick's and Morty's journeys, and they often feel like afterthoughts or underwritten. I get why the show is called Rick and Morty. I'm not suggesting that Summer be in every single adventure, because I understand the setup of the show, but I do think that its gender politics are not great. They even had to do a joke one episode about how poorly they handle women, because they did a joke about simulating the Bechdel test, which they rarely if ever pass. And if you know it's a problem enough to riff on it, maybe do something about it.
Yeah, I agree. And I think that as the show's going on, we've seen Space Beth come in, which gives Beth more of an arc there. And then last season, the arc for Summer was really with Morty, of them becoming friends and working together. I don't know that will last, but for that episode, It was their arc. Yeah, I agree with you. Summer is one of my favorite characters. I think Spencer Grammer does a really great job. Nepotism be damned. As Kelsey Grammer's daughter, I think she's genuinely good. And I really like her voice acting work within the series. Also, was she on that show Greek on ABC Family?
Maybe.
One of the Grammer children was.
Let's do a...
If so, good for her. Yeah, she was on Greek. Yeah, but I think she does a really good job. So I'm hoping to see more of Summer. I like the episodes where Summer and Rick get together and fuck stuff up. I love Something Wicked This Way Comes, where Summer's working for the devil and then gets taken advantage of by him. And then Rick and her bulk up and kick his ass to X gonna give it to you. Yeah, so I love that episode. I'd like to see more like that just for my personal enjoyment. And, I'd like to see Rick experience some real consequences or even recognize that he's experiencing consequences. We've got, after this season, we'll still have 50 episodes to go. So they've got time, but I'm ready for it.
I don't think it's going to happen. I don't think that's the show.
Ooh, bringing up things you don't think is going to happen. So to me, it seems obvious, already what the show is leading up to at the end is that the bonds that we create with our family and the people we love are the most important. And I think that we're already seeing that and everything. And I'm hoping at the end that's what the big lesson is. And you can call me sentimental or whatever. I don't care. I just think that's what it is already. And I think that's what Rick really needs to accept to end the show.
I would love for that to be true. I just don't think this is a show that has a lesson in mind. I don't think this is a show that wants us to feel sentimental at the end of it. I bet the last episode is them just like going to Fart Planet and fighting a fart monster. I feel like this is a show that is going to reject sentimentality at every turn. I bet like the next to last episode will have some sentimental spin, and then Rick will go like, what are we doing? We got one more episode. And then the last episode will actually just be absolutely inconsequential.
That's fine. I don't mind how they have to package it.
Sure.
I think we're already getting it in episodes, and I think it's what will hold true at the end.
I hope you're right. We'll see, I guess.
Yeah, so that's the Rick and Morty episode.
There we go. We did it. It's done.
So you can watch Rick and Morty on Adult Swim at 11 p.m. EST on Sundays. New season is airing now. And
the whole series is on Hulu. They also put the first episode of season 5 on YouTube. Adult Swim did just for free. So check that out.
Which was kind of them. That's and neat. A good way to get people interested in the new season, especially as less and less people have cable.
Yeah. So we hope you enjoyed our Rick and Morty episode. Enjoy Rick and Morty responsibly. Don't dox people. Don't be a dick. And until next time, Brooke, what's a real world rec for you?
I've been making a lot of chicken salad, and I'm really good at it. And it's the easiest recipe ever. It's canned chicken, mayonnaise, grapes, almonds, salt, and pepper. And it's really good. So, I don't know. Just mix them all together in a way that you're like, that would taste good, and you'll have the most delicious chicken salad you've ever had in your life.
Awesome. It is very good. I've been eating the chicken salad. I've been enjoying it a lot. My real-world recommendation is another series available on Hulu. This is the freeform original drama Motherland, Fort Salem, which is about... so we all know the Salem witch trials, which were a terrible miscarriage of justice, and there were no actual witches. But what this show dares to ask is, what if they were, and now the witches run the country, and all witches are child soldiers? It's a silly, it's a freeform, formerly ABC Family show. It's very, like, Riverdale-esque and CW-esque in how over the top it is. I love it. It's a mess, and if you enjoy this sort of stuff, I would recommend checking it out. So, thanks for listening to Nation of Animation here on the Audio Mint Network. Please enjoy all the rest of the Audio Mint shows like our other show, Blank City Nowhere, or Yeah, We Read It, or Wrestling History 101, or anything else that we put out. And we would love to hear from you, so follow us on Twitter and Instagram at Cartoon Book Club. And until next time, Brooke, would you like to do the honors?
The state of animation is...
RICKLE!
And also strong.
And strong. Nation of Animation is hosted by Ryan Stevens and Brooke Aaron Smith and produced by Danny Mendoza. Our show art is by Hervashi Lele, and our theme music is by Jacob Menke. Be sure to follow us at Cartoon Book Club on Twitter and Instagram. Thanks for listening!